just as a disclaimer before we start, this video is sort of a review, and reviews are for readers, so this is not for Milo, it is not for his friends, his family, anyone on his team. And if this kind of content would make you uncomfortable to watch, then I suggest that you just click away. A second disclaimer that I do want to make is that I'm very much not in the target demographic for this book in basically every way. Like all of the specific genre elements, young adult, fantasy, romance, dystopian governments, all of that kind of stuff is just not really the kind of thing that I like to read in fiction anymore. Maybe when I was younger I was into some like YA stuff, but not really anymore. And then further, just, I'm currently in grad school, so I don't really have the free time to do a lot of reading for pleasure anymore, and when I do, I generally read nonfiction books, and then when I do read fiction books, the rare chances that I get, they tend more towards like the highbrow literary fiction type stuff. Editor me here, just something I forgot to mention in the first round of filming. I'll be making some like assumptions about Milo's personal life and his relationships, and I just want to clarify that I have never interacted with Milo. I don't know him personally, I've never met him in real life, I've never interacted with him online, and I'm not trying to diagnose him with anything. This is entirely just based off of what I find in both his online presence so far and in the text of the novel. With all that out of the way, we can begin the video. So, in this very first video, I do have a confession to make, that I'm kind of a messy bitch who loves drama sometimes. And I know that a lot of online drama, specifically YouTube drama, can be very bad, like it's just sort of a bad content ecosystem in general, and that a lot of people feel that it's sort of not something that's worthwhile in terms of consuming. But despite all of that, sometimes I just sort of can't look away. And when I first learned about this Milo Winter Age of Scorpius drama that was happening, I saw a video in like late August or September or something, probably from Meredith Novico. I started following it, and I got really hooked, because it just sort of seemed like a perfect summation of all of the problems within BookTok or BookTube. It's a YA fantasy romance novel with sort of own voice characters that's sort of published in this kind of shady way in terms of using the TikTok shop to send bookmarks. It was marketed very much using pity marketing, and then also with marketing that was just sort of based off of the author's own story and the vibes and all of that kind of stuff, as opposed to like actual excerpts of the book. To my knowledge, the only excerpts of like the first 4 pages were posted like in late June, right before the book was even published. And then just the total failure of edits, even on like a very basic level. So once I got into that, I just continued to really fall into the rabbit hole. I swear I've probably seen like every single video on YouTube that's about this kind of content. And the drama side of it, with like what happened with Milo Winter and all of the responses that he's made and the different articles and videos that he's created, that's not what this video is about. This will focus on the text of the book itself. If you want like an overview more of the drama side of things, Meredith Novico has like 4 videos, I think total right now, that come across to like 6 hours in total, that just sort of go over the step-by-step coverage of like the specific events, and there's plenty of other people who have covered this if you just like search up Age of Scorpius on YouTube. So one creator, Jolie Black, their video was something that I found very interesting and sort of inspired me to make my own video about it. Both Jolie and I are similar in that we're both older, autistic, queer academics who are focusing in our academic work on the ancient world. And we both sort of can see a lot of ourselves in the way that he's been acting. So their videos sort of focus on just the way that autism can present itself and how that then can interact in terms of like being afraid to really just go look at the text and edit it. And that's certainly something that I can feel a lot myself when it came to like writing my master's thesis. Reading that now, it's almost like painful to see how juvenile I feel the writing is now, even though that I only wrote that like 3 years ago. I will say that I do not have like a personal paracosm, so that is a difference between myself and Jolie, and also a difference between myself and Milo. I never really got into fantasy when I was younger, and have not ever gotten into it really as an adult either. So the discourse that I've seen online really hasn't focused that much on the actual like content and text of the story, independent of just sort of the general drama, and especially independent of the poor quality of the writing on a line level. There are some reviews that go over the plot of the story by Reads with Rachel did one, The Queer Reader did one, but they don't generally focus on like the themes and the messaging, and that's what I want to get to in this. So the fundamental question that I'm trying to answer in this video is, what is the Age of Scorpius about? Also, Julie Black's videos inspired me, and that's the whole reason why I'm wearing this Drive Like Jehu shirt, is just that they were wearing a Nirvana and then Alice in Chains t-shirt, so I decided to wear my own 90s alt-rock band t-shirt. To begin with, we can have a quick plot recap. I won't be going into super great detail here. There are the aforementioned videos by Reads with Rachel and The Queer Reader if you want to go into a lot more detail. And you can skip to the time shown on screen right now if you already know the plot. So, to start with, the world is based around the zodiac signs. Everyone is divided into one of the 12 zodiac signs, and then these are all divided themselves into 4 unions, which are called conviction, assiduous, autarkic, and societal. And I think that there's clearly sort of a lot of influence from the Harry Potter houses and then also the factions of Divergent. And it's also worth noting that conviction is a noun, and the other 3 are all adjectives, which is something that Divergent did as well. And that, furthermore, assiduous, like the definition of the word just sort of means like showing great perseverance, while conviction is just a noun that is like the quality of having perseverance or determination. So we start with our main character, Rika Spring, who is a Scorpio historian in training, and her older Aries half-sister, Avia. They go to the hub, which is sort of the center where all of the unions can interact, for a ceremony, the balancing ceremony, or the rebalancing ceremony, that is sort of a coming-of-age ceremony that makes them full members of the society. And they meet during the ceremony a Libra named Chase. After the ceremony, Chase and Rika go to an arch that Rika had already been studying previously as a historian, and it turns out that Chase can read the ancient language called Drixal on it. It's revealed later that this is because he's a Libran healer, and they can just automatically read this particular language. It's one of the things that's just extremely convenient in the plot. And this ancient Driscoll inscription on the arch tells them that they need to restore balance with the Calexis, which is then explained to be a mythical sword from the ancient world that, like, grants immortality to whoever is struck by it. The 2 of them return to the hub, where they're attacked by the Scorpio Stellarium, which is basically the government, and through some magic, I genuinely don't remember, they end up going through a portal that leads them to the Scorpio Archive. And then there, they very conveniently happen to find a scroll that tells them that the Calexis, which was assumed to be mythical, is actually real, and that they need to find it, and that if they find it, it'll prove that the Scorpio Code is fabricated. The Scorpio Code is sort of the law that governs the whole sign of Scorpio, and it tells you that you cannot show any emotions, that you cannot fall in love, and that you cannot make any friends. So the 2 of them get the scroll, and then they go back to the hotel or wherever that they're staying and decide to change rooms because now they know that the Scorpio Stellarium is after them. They sneak out the next day, even though the Stellarium is like raiding the hotel, and try to go out to meet up with Avia through a snowstorm, but they end up sort of getting lost and are taken in by Atlas Fulbright, who is the Arctura, which is just like the leader of the Aries faction. Who gives them a bunch of exposition sort of about the world, and then a war that happened 300 years previously called the War of Rebalancing. And he tells them to go to another specific place where they'll find more information. The 2 of them leave, and then they finally meet up with Avia. But they're attacked by the assassin who is named Nara, who Rika constantly says, like, feels very familiar to her. But she doesn't know why. It turns out they were in a relationship previously, but then Rika had all of her memories wiped. Then they manage to incapacitate Nara, but they decide not to kill her, even though that she is an assassin trying to kill them. The next day, Rika has a dream where she sort of explores her childhood experiences of abuse at the hands of the Scorpio Stellarium while she was in school for showing emotion. And when she wakes up, they all go to a town in the societal faction that's called Lyra. When they get there, the Scorpio Stellarium is still looking for them there, and they meet a Cancer water mage girl named Kaya, whose brother had once been saved by Rika and Nara, but then later on, while Rika's in the hub with Chase, he gets killed in front of them. So Kaya joins the party. It's up to 4 people now. While they're in this town, Lyra, the Scorpio Arctura attacks them at the inn that they're staying in, and Rika sort of suddenly unlocks a power called Zodiac Turning, and inadvertently uses it against one of the Scorpio Stellarium's members, and they flee by jumping down a cliff. And I feel like I should mention that Zodiac Turning, it's one of the arch powers, which are abilities that were particularly powerful, which had been banned previously during the War of Rebalancing, for basically being too strong and for throwing society out of balance. Chase, as I had mentioned, is a Libran healer, which is one of them, and then eventually Kaya, who had just joined them, she will turn out to be the third, Spirit Walking. So after they have this encounter with the Scorpio Stellarium and the Scorpio Stellarium's leader, they end up sort of running out and flee by jumping down a cliff. Kaya uses her water mage magic to use water from a nearby river to break their fall. They continue wandering. Nara shows up again, they fight again, but then she decides just to not kill Rika because she wants to watch her burn, which is like very bad assassin. Rika uses her turning power again and then ends up passing out, and then she wakes up when the whole party has gotten onto a boat that's going up the river to go to the next place in the plot that they have to go to. After like some boring banter, she ends up taking a nap where she has another dream that gives more background on her and Nara fighting against the Scorpio Stellarium. It turns out that they're both Zodiac Turners, and their sort of strategy is that they attack any of the Scorpio Stellarium guards and turn them so that they're no longer Scorpios, and therefore that they'll no longer do the bidding of the Stellarium. This was all a dream, so Rika wakes up, and the boat that they're on is being, like, hit by a storm. They all have to jump overboard. They narrowly escape, but after they all get onto shore, they end up sort of wandering into a cave. So they go further into this cave, and they have discussions just sort of about some of the lore that they've covered previously, about Matthias, Merrick, and his son Silas. So in the story, they were the ones who sort of were tasked by the gods to create the Calexis Blade and to seal away the power of immortality within it so that it would, like, bring balance to the world, and that supposedly these characters are still around and because they're immortal, and while they're discussing this, the characters sort of debate whether or not it's true. While in this cave, Rika has another dream where she sees Nara instead being hurt by the Stellarium. It specifically tells the story of how Nara was forced to wipe her memories, which is why Rika has, for the most part, does not remember interacting with Nara in their previous relationship, even though they were, like, very closely involved. When she wakes up, her emotions are running very high, so she accidentally uses her Zodiac Turning ability on Chase and turns him into a Scorpio. And he ends up mentioning how intense his emotions now feel. So Chase, Rika, and Kaya all sort of talk about just the various emotions that they're feeling, and Avia, who's, I think, still asleep, or maybe she's, like, in another room, they just sort of, like, mention why it would be bad if he was there, and Rika eventually manages to turn Chase's sign back to normal. When they get through to the other end of the cave, they're jumped by some strangers and sort of are taken to a house where they find out that they're in the village of Reika, which is very annoying given that the main character's name is Rika, which is an autarkic village in Assiduous's territory that is magically protected from most outsiders. We later learn that only people from specific bloodlines are allowed in, and very conveniently, all four of these characters all happen to be from those bloodlines. At this time, Kaya's spirit walking powers are also activated because she's been in contact with Chase's Libran healing abilities, which is, for whatever reason, a requirement to activate the spirit walking stuff. And similarly to how Chase's Libran healing means that he could understand the one ancient language, the people in this village of Reika, they speak a different language, but Kaya's spirit walking powers let her understand that language, and they eventually get them free. So the party are given a place to stay in this village, and while they're sleeping, Rika has yet another dream where Nara shows up in her current form as an assassin and basically attacks her, dislocating her shoulder and breaking her collarbone. So Chase has to heal her again. Like, Chase uses his healing powers just constantly throughout the entire narrative. They reveal that Chase has been, like, keeping medical records on all of them, and that every time that he uses his healing powers, he just automatically learns all of their vitals, and that he's been, like, writing this all down in journals, which is very bizarre. They then decide, again, not to tell Avia any of this, and have just generally been antagonizing Avia to a great degree. And they all go to a temple where Sora, a woman who was one of the people who had captured the party earlier, she's staying there. At this temple, there's sort of a beautiful mural on the wall that can magically shift into different pictures that Sora herself had painted, and they get a huge info dump about the history of the world and the War of Rebalancing and the Calexis Blade and the Merrick family. Matthias, the immortal creator of the Calexis, had a Cancer wife and 2 children, Silas the Scorpio and an Aries, who turns out to be Atlas Fulbright, who they met earlier. And then they make friends with Blaine, who ends up being the immortal creator of the Scorpio Code, and the daughter of the current Aries leader. Blaine and this girl are dating, but Silas basically cucks Blaine and takes his girlfriend, and in response, Blaine gets super pissed off and attacks them. He's a Zodiac turner and turns himself into Leo. He fabricates the Scorpio Code and makes everyone hate the Merrick family and think that the Calexis is fake. So the Merrick family all go into hiding, even though they're immortal, and they return the Calexis sword to the caves that are beneath the village of Reka for safekeeping until this group of random teenagers 300 years later go to undo that. So at the end of all of this lore dump, the characters all discuss basically how illogical the history that they were taught in school was, and they decide that they should go find the Calexis in the caves beneath Reka to prove that the code is fake. Chase and Rika then decide to just go for a stroll in the nearby forest, and there they get attacked by this weird wolf-dragon hybrid creature, and the description of this has been memed on and clowned on in a lot of other videos. And once they end up defeating that, after Rika takes a lot of damage, Nara shows up, who kidnaps them and puts them into a different cave. When Rika is awake, but Chase is still unconscious, Nara reveals that she herself and Chase are siblings, and that they are both the children of Silas Merrick and Sora, the woman from the village, and that Atlas Fulbright is actually their uncle, because he's the brother of Silas. Because they're all from the sacred bloodlines, that's why they can all enter Reka, which is normally magically protected, so that outsiders can't enter it. So Nara also says that she was separated from Chase at a young age when she was 3 and Chase was 5, and that she was raised by her mother Sora and Atlas until she was 13, whereas Chase was raised by his father Silas, and that when Nara was 13, she was kidnapped by Blaine, and he put a curse on her that would make it physically painful to be in the presence of her family. And then Nara further reveals that Blaine is Rika's biological father, because Rika and Avia, they share the same mother, but Rowan is Avia's biological father and Rika's stepfather, although she always calls him Dad. Rika gets very upset that Blaine is her father, because he's sort of the main big bad antagonist. So Nara knocks her out, and she has another dream of herself and Nara in Conviction Woods, where she grew up, just sort of making out and doing cute couple things, and saying that they love each other. When she wakes up, Nara is very conflicted about whether or not she should continue her role hunting down Rika, or if she should sort of defect from the Scorpio Stellarium. And Rika ends up ripping off a pendant that she's wearing that has been cursed sort of to make her angry and an enemy of Rika. And when she rips it off, it breaks the curse, and she no longer really wants to kill Rika. Because we learn at this point also that Zodiac Turners can just magically break curses. It's just another of the million plot conveniences in this entire book. Nara is now turned to the good side and doesn't want to work for the Stellarium any further, but she doesn't want to join the party because she still thinks that curse keeping her from her family is in place. So Nara lets Chase and Rika go, but she doesn't join them because of that curse. So Chase and Rika rejoin the other two. They all discuss what they've learned regarding Rika's ancestry, but they all say that Chase can't learn that he's the son of Silas and that Sora is his mother for some reason. They just say that it's really important that he doesn't learn this. And the next day, Sora turns out to be a Zodiac Turner and helps Rika train to properly control both her emotions and turning, because Zodiac Turning is very much based on controlling your emotions. After this training session, Rika and Sora go to another cave that's sacred to the Zodiac Turners, and when they're there, Atlas Fulbright shows up suddenly and tells them a bunch more lore dumping. It turns out that Avia's father and Rika's stepfather, named Rowan, is also immortal, and he's also a spirit walker, and that the curse keeping Nara away from Sora and Atlas has been broken, so that she could have joined the party if he had known that. It's also revealed that Blaine doesn't know that Nara and Rika had previously been in a relationship with each other, and that for some vague reason, if he did learn that Nara and Rika had previously been dating, that would be very bad. So Rika rejoins the rest of the group, and then they all decide to go to the cave that has the Klexus in it. And they just sort of solve a handful of puzzles, and while they're doing all of this, Chase realizes that he has his Libran healing powers, and that when Rika briefly turned him into a Scorpio, he also had Zodiac turning powers, so he has genetics from both of these lines, and that he also has some memories of a sister that his father sort of gaslit him and said were false. Rika tries to resist telling him all of the truth, but he eventually realizes that, although he doesn't realize that Silas is his dad, that he does have both Zodiac turning and Libran healing genetics in his family. They eventually get to the room that has the Klexus blade in it, and it's sort of filled with bones from previous people who have tried to get it. And they manage to cross a stream where it is, but they also find like some giant beast that's also extremely poorly described. It's immortal, and it heals itself every time they attack it, and they try to hurt it. So Rika uses her turning powers on this beast, which like sends her into this weird limbo near-death vision state of the Conviction Woods where she grew up, where there's sort of like a massive wolf spirit thing that functions as a guardian angel there, and she like goes forward to hug it, and she has this big epiphany about like the importance of balance. So Rika eventually wakes up from this vision, and Nara shows up just in the nick of time to save her, again very convenient, and Nara sort of hypnotizes the beast for a little bit and gets Chase and Kaya to cut open a cut on their hands and hold it together to do sort of like a blood brother ritual thing that somehow calms the beast down. It turns out that because Chase is a healer and also the grandson of Matthias Merrick, and Kaya is a spirit walker, just like Matthias's wife Mary, the beast thinks that it's Matthias and his wife, and just sort of stops attacking them. At this point, this is when Chase realizes that Silas Merrick is his dad, and Nara just sort of gives him a bunch more information about their family, including revealing that he's Nara's brother. And it's sort of like a comical moment where all of the action is stopped, and then Nara and Rika both realize that they're still trying to get the sword, so they both jump and grab the sword at the same time and start struggling over it, because Nara, even though she doesn't want to work for the Stellarium anymore, she wants to give them the Klexus blade so that they won't find out that she and Rika have been in a relationship together, because that would be bad, whereas Rika still wants to use it to overthrow the Scorpio Code. They both end up agreeing to drop it, and Chase takes it, and then they all just sort of make up. There's a lot of, like, high school drama tier, just sort of descriptions of the pain that Nara feels right now, and the pain that Rika feels, and the pain that they all agree they're going to be feeling as a result of being in a relationship together and working together now. Eventually, they all exit the cave, where Sora and Atlas are there, and Sora, Atlas, Chase, and Nara all have a big family reunion where they hug and all of that, because they're both the two children of Sora. The group ends up returning to the house that they'd been staying at, where they discuss what they should do next. Everyone suddenly gets super mean towards Avia again for making some jokes. Finally, the rest agree to, like, take showers or naps, so Nara and Rika get a chance to just sort of act cute and coupley together. Atlas and Sora then come over to sort of discuss their plans for the future, and Atlas says that they can overthrow the Scorpio Code through a vote from the 12 leaders of the different signs, and that having the Klexus with them will be able to just sort of prove that the Scorpio Code is fake, even though, like, all of the other 12 signs, there's frequent mentions throughout the book about how they all hate the Scorpio Code and the Scorpio Stellarium in general, and that they would all probably want to vote to overthrow it already. Then Sora has dinner with her two children, Chase and Nara, and then afterwards, Rika and Nara climb up a snowy mountain where they kiss at the top. Throughout the book, especially in the flashbacks, Nara had been calling Rika Kira, and Rika sort of asks what the origin of this nickname is, and Nara says that it's just an anagram of Rika, even though Rika is 5 letters long, Kira is 4 letters long, so they have to drop out the E, but I'll go on to that, sort of what I think that's about later. So the book ends then with the two of them on the top of this mountain, and Rika just sort of further describing how much she wants to overthrow the Scorpio Stellarium and destroy the code, and sort of undo all of the evil that her father has done. So I wanted to create a family tree just to show who is related to whom, and then also who's immortal and who isn't. So we start off with Rhea, who is at this time the Libra leader. She is immortal. The circles all mean immortality. I think she's been immortal for at least 100 years, and she has her daughter Kaya, who joins the party. She also had a unnamed Scorpio son who was initially saved by Rika and Nara from the Scorpio Stellarium, but then during the events of the novel, he ends up getting executed for breaking the code. Moving on, we have Matthias Merrick and his wife Mari. I can't remember if Mari is immortal or not. Matthias is immortal. This is the original creator of the Calexis Blade. He was the one who was tasked by the gods or whatever to take immortality from Guardian and to put it into the Calexis sword. They had two sons together, Atlas Fulbright and Silas Merrick. So Atlas Fulbright is the leader of the Ares, and he took his Fulbright last name instead of Merrick from an unnamed husband that we get for like one sentence in the book. So Silas Merrick ends up marrying Sora, and together they have two children, Chase and Nara. And then when Chase was 5 and Nara was 3, the two children end up getting split up. Chase is raised by Silas Merrick, his father in Conviction Woods, while Nara is raised by Sora and Atlas Fulbright until she was 13 and ends up getting kidnapped by Blaine. Blaine, who is the creator of the Scorpio Code, he's also immortal. He had initially been dating Sora, but Silas ended up taking Sora from him, and he was apparently so salty at that's his entire motivation for like hating immortality, hating Zodiac Turners, and putting the all of the events of the plot into place. Blaine ended up having a child with Rika and Avia's mother. I can't remember if she even gets a name in the book, and that child is Rika. But a year before that, because Avia is a year older, this mother had a child with Rowan, who is Avia. And Rowan, Avia's father and Rika's stepfather, is also immortal. And then finally, with our couplings amongst the party, at the end of the book, we have Chase and Avia. There's a lot of sexual tension between them, but it's unclear, to me at least, if they're officially dating by the end of the book or not. But then Nara and Rika, they had already been dating before Rika's memories got wiped, and then by the end of the book, they begin dating again. God. So, if that seemed like a really confusing, just sort of difficult to follow plot summary, I swear it's just because the book is really this confusing and poorly plotted out, and everything is just super convenient in this way. I'm doing my best. I'm sure just given how poorly written and poorly developed the book is that I made a lot of mistakes there, but a lot of this I think does come down to the quality of the book itself. So as an example of just sort of how confusing the world building is and just the writing in general, at the end of the book, in sort of a final argument between Avia and Kaya, Avia says that Kaya wouldn't understand what it's like to grow up with a Scorpio sibling and to have sort of the Scorpio Stellarium and the Scorpio Code breathing down their necks, when Kaya's whole motivation for joining the party was that she had a Scorpio younger brother who ended up being killed by the Scorpio Stellarium for breaking the code. And that, this is her core motivation, and that the book just seems to have totally forgotten about that. So, and there's 1,000 different examples of broken continuity between different parts of the story, and it can get very confusing. I want to look at the textual themes and sort of what the textual message is on its own. So the main theme, just textually in this book, is balance. Just sort of the idea of the balance between the different signs, between the different unions, also the balance between humans and nature, the balance within nature itself, and then also the balance of emotions within individual humans. So when Rika sort of has that vision while they're fighting the beast and talks to the guardian angel wolf thing, it sort of discusses how it would be wrong to view wolves in nature as purely a negative thing because they are sort of a keystone species within their environment, and that removing them, even though they kill other animals, would end up undoing the balance of nature in this way. and that the War of Rebalancing, it happens 300 years before the plot of the book, but it's very clearly sort of, the repercussions continue to affect it, was all about making sure that the amounts of powers between the different signs stay balanced, and also that certain things like immortality or the three archpowers are sort of banned because they would lead to unbalance. And the narration of the book frequently talks about how the Scorpio Code makes society unbalanced, both because it means that individual Scorpios are unable to properly balance their own emotions, but also that it ends up, for reasons that I do not understand and are never explained, the Scorpio Code somehow means that the Scorpios are in power and are able to sort of rule over all of the other signs, as opposed to living in a more egalitarian way. And it's worth mentioning that Aries, like Avia, also are supposed to not express certain emotions like fear. Aries are supposed to be sort of the warriors of society, but this does not ever seem to be any kind of problem in terms of like the balance thing that the Scorpio Code is allegedly destroying. And like what balance really even means in the context of this book is very unclear. The word gets used like almost 100 times throughout the book, and there's just constant mentions about how the world and society as it currently is unbalanced and bad, and that it leads to death, but there's never any meaningful elaboration on what that means. And a secondary major theme in this novel is environmentalism and ecology. Milo described himself as an ecologist, and Rika is frequently shown to have a very close connection to nature. And in particular, both author and main character seem to have like a very strong particular love of wolves. So there's also like frequently uses of words that are very specific to ecology, such as describing Conviction Woods as a temperate rainforest, and then there's also a description of the beast guarding the Calexis as having an anisodactyl foot, which is like the description of a type of bird foot. There are also just like a ton of different times that wolves are mentioned. It turns out that Rika has a wolf fur blanket. She wears a wolf mask when she and Nara are fighting the Stellarium in the flashbacks. The guardian angel at the end of the book is a wolf, and Rika once calls herself a cowardly wolf for like running away and not fighting the Stellarium directly. So, like, just be a furry at this point. Honestly, the story would be 10 out of 10 if they just made them all hot anthro people. And then finally, the final theme in the book is the weaponization of religion, as the Scorpio Code is clearly meant to be sort of an analog for the Bible, or other religious texts that the government or people in power in general would use to oppress others and to enforce their specific ideas of society. But kind of surprisingly, this doesn't really seem to be that big of an element of the story when you actually get into it. Like, we learn basically nothing about the actual religious practices or beliefs of the people in this world, if there are different religions or different sects within this, like, the religious landscape. Rika, and then basically literally every other character, just sort of constantly talks about how much they hate the code and how they want to rip it apart, but there's really not that much beyond that. Like, you could basically just say that the code was a law that was passed 300 years ago that's really repressive, and functionally nothing would change in terms of how the story actually plays out. So if those are like the main sort of direct textual themes, I think there's also a lot of sort of unintentional messaging that we can get from the book that are just sort of accidentally included as part of Milo's worldview, especially given that a lot of the elements of both the world building and then the plot in particular had been developed since Milo was a teenager and probably did not have the talent or self-awareness to really understand that these were the things that he was encoding within his story. So the biggest example of these sorts of things is the Scorpio Code. So the code forbids Scorpios from ever expressing any emotions, despite the fact that Scorpios feel emotions stronger than the other signs, from falling in love and from making friends. And I think that this is pretty clearly an expression of Milo's personal difficulties in functioning as a queer person with autism and ADHD. So Rika cannot express her love, something that a lot of LGBT people feel, especially when they're teenagers and they haven't been out of the closet yet. And the ban on expressing any kind of emotions, despite feeling them really strongly, is pretty clearly an analog to the difficulties that a lot of neurodivergent people have in terms of properly regulating their emotions. And then the final part about friendship is also likely sort of about the way that being neurodivergent can often mean that it's difficult to find people that you're close with and that you can make friends with. And I certainly can relate to that. I was not a very popular person in high school and even in undergrad. And I think that this also sort of shows that this is a very teenage understanding of how things like religious law works, because there's no further elements of the Scorpio Code that involve other societal duties. Like, if you look at the 10 Commandments, beyond the first few commandments that are specifically about, having only the one God, not building idols and all of that kind of stuff, the rest of it is just sort of a general moral code about not killing, not stealing, not coveting, not cheating on people, and that there's nothing like that in terms of the Scorpio Code. It's just these very specific things, and it's one of the elements that makes the world feel so ridiculously flat and underdeveloped, despite the fact that Milo claims he's been working on this world for 3 hours a day for at least 10 years at this point. Furthermore, the code really falls apart as an element of the world building because literally no one seems to take it seriously and no one seems to like it, despite the fact that it's literally enforced by death. It's also used as the basis for why Scorpios are the ones in power, and their stellarium is sort of the most powerful out of all of the 12 signs. But oppressing your own people doesn't really make sense as a way to get political power. There's not a logical way for you to figure that out as a reader, and it's certainly never explained at all in text. And Rika mentions at one point that the code has been responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths, which is insane. Even if we go at the lowest amount, 100,000, for 300 years, that's killing one person a day at a minimum. So the code is basically doing genocide against its own people, and that somehow gets them in power? Another one of the messages that I think is just sort of unintentionally part of this is that all of the characters seem to be based, however loosely, on real-world people, or at least expressions of emotions that Milo feels. Avia, the narrative just constantly shits on her, and all of the other characters basically are just constantly talking about how much she sucks and that she doesn't bring anything to the table. She's the only one out of the main party that doesn't have any of the arch powers, and it seems that she's just sort of based off of a sister or a half-sister that Milo really doesn't like. And then further, there's a lot of description about how their biological mother is really cold, and that Rika really doesn't get along with her, but that Rika really likes her stepfather, Avia's biological father, Rowan, and he's always just sort of described in these glowing terms. Furthermore, I think Kaya, as a character, I do wonder if she is pretty much based off of, to at least some degree, Katara from Avatar, in that they're both described as being darker-skinned but have blue eyes. They're water mages, and they have sort of the team mom maternal energy, and that's the role that they fill with respect to the rest of the people in their party. Another element is just that the character Rika herself is very much and very clearly a self-insert for Milo. He said that he's been working on the books in some form or another for about a decade, and it really shows in Rika. I've heard, just from some other videos, that the character was originally named Akira, probably from Akira from Death Note, and that we can sort of tell that just because Rika is just very obviously an anagram of Akira, but if you change one of the A's to an E. And the fact that Rika's nickname is Kira is also further evidence of this. The fact that Rika's last name is Spring makes that so obvious when the author's name, the author's sort of pen name last name is Winter. And then that also just sort of continues. Milo has had a tendency of using a variety of names that are 5 letters long and that also start and end with the letter A. Akira, one of his previous screen names was Alpha Wolf, so Alpha, and then Audra, his previous name. So It seems like all of these are then reflected into the character of Rika. It's also revealed that heterochromia iridum, so having two different colored eyes, is one of the markers of being a zodiac turner, and that just sort of screams Mary Sue, given the reputation of characters having different colored eyes, as being just something that makes you seem really cool and special and out there. I also believe that Chase was initially intended to be the main love interest for Rika in the earliest drafts of this work, potentially before Milo even really figured out that he wasn't sexually interested into men. Because especially early on in the book, he's constantly described as like being tall and handsome and strong, and like he's also just as a personality, he's very bland, just sort of like blandly supportive in sort of a Prince Charming type way. He sort of gets paired off with Avia by the end of the book, and then there's also frequent mentions that because Nara and Chase are siblings, they look very similar, and Nara also gets described as taller than Rika. She's stronger than Rika physically. Nara and Chase have like the same facial features. There's a ton of descriptions. There's a ton of mentions of both of their jawlines being like strong, so I don't know if that's like something that Milo likes in particular. Finally, the book seems to have been sort of written and rewritten multiple times, at least according to Milo, over a long stretch of time, and you can see that just with sort of how the world building and then the actual plot of the story interact or really fail to interact. The idea of the plot, that just a group of teenagers fight against a dystopian government that weaponizes religious texts against them, is ultimately entirely unrelated to any of the actual world building about the Zodiac stuff. And if you replaced that with just like a random lottery that every 12th baby would be marked and put into a group that then gets oppressed by the rest of them, or literally any other kind of arbitrary division of society, nothing would meaningfully change about how the plot actually goes and works. So I strongly believe that a lot of the stuff that Milo's been talking about in terms of putting in these 10,000 hours of work just means world-building stuff, and that the plot and working on developing the plot has ultimately been very poorly considered. So the quality of the writing is something that's probably been the most criticized from this book, and certainly like just the prose, the words on the page are truly just awful in a lot of places. And yeah, I have to agree with that. I do have to note, so my edition is an ebook that I got from the World of Guardian website, which is where it's available for purchase. And although they say that this is the initial version that got all of the criticism, there clearly have been some edits that have been made. So on the very first page, the second sentence, there's the phrase in the original versions that Conviction Woods is eternally inhabitable. My edition corrects it to say that it's eternally uninhabitable. So there have been some edits. It would be really funny if that was literally just the only one that they changed. But there's still like consistent continuity errors. There are words that are used wrong. There are formatting errors throughout the book. So this is clearly not something that's been like carefully proofread. I think more than just like the problems with the typos and just blatantly misusing words or continuity errors, the biggest problem that I have with this is just attempts at purple prose that is just utterly inscrutable and unreadable. For example, and these are the very last two paragraphs from the book, we get, "My magic jumped to life underneath the moonlight, illuminating her body and my own in an ancient dance of blood and storm, of balance and unity, of the equal forces of change and fate. Within me stirred the calling of stories old and new, to glow as if there were stars hidden in every part of my skin. I was made of a universal truth of love and war. And I knew, with this force of fighting and fury and fire, nothing would stop me from tearing the Scorpio code apart with my bare hands and sharpened claws." And then again, on page 371, we get, "My blood boiled, the third part of the trilogy of emotions, and a roar bubbled in my throat. Light sprinted through me, magic alive with my anger, thrashing like a flood on fire meant to burn and drown all in its path. I had never met the man, and somehow my anger accumulated into an eruption of a storm inside me. one that forced my mouth open in a scream. A relearned anger seared through me. I wanted to tear my skin open with the teeth of a beast of my own self, let myself cry until I bled a new color. I had been trained in a militaristic fashion to survive, to take the arrow and rise again, and to yell and scream until I was heard. A promise was made. I would reinvent myself until I was heard, until my muzzle became agape with a howl that could not be ignored. I was ready for a new color of blood, ready to tear each part of myself out, until I became a blank canvas, ready to grow my new claws. So, as I said, these are utterly just inscrutable. I have no idea what any of that is even supposed to mean, and it really, really comes across as a teenager who thinks that this is the deepest writing that has ever existed. There are also some other little things that I noticed about the writing, the frequent use of the word screaming in a metaphorical sense to describe, a screaming pain. That sort of makes sense, but then there's, screaming lights, or, a screaming emotion. I think the word screaming ends up getting used, I did a search, it's 20 times or something throughout the book. And then finally, there's also a weird mix of contemporary vocabulary and slang being used in this setting that's sort of supposed to be this fantasy world. It's very bizarre because you'll have words that are in sort of modern mental health psychology discourse, like gaslit, or talking about trauma, that feel extremely specific to contemporary American society, and you would not expect that to be the case centuries into the future. The characters in the story are also all just incredibly flat and one note, and none of them experience any kind of meaningful change or arc throughout the story. And with the very minor exception of Avia, who comes across as slightly more sarcastic and a little bit cruel sometimes, they all speak in basically the exact same voice, to the degree that you can't really tell the difference of who is speaking and when. And they all have just very bland personalities. Chase and Kaya, I genuinely could not even describe really any elements of their personalities beyond just generic nice hero. Rika is kind of feisty, where she's constantly sort of angry all the time. Like I said, Avia is kind of sarcastic, and then Nara is also just sort of angry and a little bit angsty as well. The text really focuses on the pain that Nara and Rika feel as a result of the Scorpio Code, even though Nara is not a Scorpio, so she's not at all subject to it. But, like I said, there's just no change or development. Rika, at the beginning of the story, she hates the code, and at the end of the story, she just hates the code more. You could say that Rika grows a little bit more comfortable in terms of expressing her emotions, given the setting where she would be literally executed if the government manages to catch her. But even at the beginning, she's already talking about hating the code, and that she has all of these emotions that she's been failing to hide. And her internal monologue every few chapters will just be about how much she hates the code and how much she wants to rip it up and all of that. So it's just extremely repetitive and boring. So, stories, and plots in particular, you can sort of divide them broadly into two types, more character-based stories and more plot-based stories. Dostoevsky, who's my favorite author, is someone that I would say is very much focused on character-based stories and often just sort of ignores really detailed plots for the most part. Whereas an author Cormac McCarthy is much more plot-based, where it's the events of the plot that you really have to analyze for the thematic significance. And this story definitely comes across more as a plot-based story, just given how flat and uninteresting and lacking depth the characters are, but the plot is just super convenient and really unengaging, just sort of by that heuristic. I think a much more interesting story to follow would be Rika initially believing in the code deeply, even though she has these struggles to follow it. And then slowly over time she learns that it's just sort of made up, and having to go through sort of this internal struggle of losing her faith in the code and in the Scorpio Stellarium. But in this story, she just starts out hating it and then continues to hate it as the story goes on. And then our flashbacks, we just get that even when she was younger, she already hated it. And so, like, for some examples of just convenience in the plot, every time that we learn of some sort of rule that the world has, like Conviction Woods, supposedly it's like enchanted so that anyone who enters the woods will immediately get ripped apart by the animals that live there. But then all of the characters that we meet, they're all just magically able to get through that. Or when it comes to the town of Reka, it's enchanted so that only people of certain bloodlines can get in there, and it just happens that all of our characters fall into those bloodlines. Or a few times there's curses that have been placed by Blaine on other people, and literally every time a curse is mentioned, in like the same paragraph, we learn that the curse has been broken. So it's just like all of the rules and the world building that we get is just all weak and pointless, and there's nothing to any of it. And then further, like the idea that we have these various immortals like Atlas Fulbright, Sora, Silas Merrick, who's apparently still out there, Rhea, who is Kaya's mother and the leader of the, I think, Libras. They all know that the code is fake and that they could have done all of these actions to help overthrow it, but instead they get this group of teenagers to go do it for them. And that's all just totally hand-waved away why they can't do it personally. And further, the fact that they can't ever, like, just directly explain what these people need to do, and instead use, like, these various cryptic messages. None of that has ever gone into, and it just seems extremely poorly thought out and very unsatisfying. And finally, the setting and the world building, which is sort of the big interest that Milo has been getting into, and it's sort of what he's been describing that he's been doing for 10 years now, really does come across as really underbaked and poorly thought out, despite how long Milo claims to have been working on it. And just a lot of this comes from it being very clear that a lot of these elements were written, or at least initially created by a younger teenager, because they show sort of a very juvenile and poorly considered understanding of how society works and why specific things are the way they are. For example, the role of religion is very, like, poorly understood. It's portrayed solely as a force for just, like, evil and manipulation that has absolutely no benefits for any of those who follow it, which is, like, how an edgy atheist teenager thinks about religion. And that's not to say that, like, in the real world, that there isn't a ton of problems and bigotry and oppression that comes from really devoutly religious people, but people aren't following religions in the real world just to be evil, or at least the vast majority of people who do that are not doing so. They do it to have some sort of sense of community and to have guidance and meaning in their life and to have a connection with their family and with their ancestors. And just none of that comes across at all. And that's, like, something that is very obvious to even, like, anyone who's older than the age of, like, 15. So I want to say, I know that you could make the argument that because this is a YA novel and because our main character, Rika, is herself a teenager who has been oppressed by the religious code in place in the society at this time, that we are just seeing her view of religion and its role in society, and not necessarily what the author's view is, and that therefore it's being accurate to in what's essentially an edgy atheist teenager's take on religion in this world. That argument doesn't really work for me, just because, like I said, we just get such a dearth of any kind of meaningful explanation of religion in this world. We have no idea what other people's beliefs are, like what the general majority believes, how they practice their religion, any of, like, sort of the mythology behind it, and things like that. The only time that religion outside of the Scorpio Code is really present in this work is when the group goes to Sora in the temple, and she sort of uses her magical powers to narrate the story of the Merricks and the Calexis and the War of Rebalancing and all of that. Beyond that, there's basically just nothing there to indicate that the view of religion that we get from the text is just Rika's personal view and not how religion is actually functioning more broadly in this world. I also just find it very funny that at the end of the book we learn that the Scorpio Code can just be overturned by a vote of the leaders of the government, and that they have to make up a supermajority of like 12 out of the 16 possible votes. And that just strikes me as very bizarre. Like, can you imagine in contemporary America if like Congress just voted to, I don't know, take out the Book of Judges from the Bible? That would be a very bizarre thing to do, and none of that bizarreness even comes across. The fact that the Scorpio Code is actually a religious text and not just a repressive law that was passed that the main characters want to overturn has basically no bearing on the plot or the world building or the structure of anything. The handling of sexuality and LGBTQ themes is also something that I'm very mixed on. On the one hand, it does seem like there's no real homophobia or discrimination for queer people, which is kind of nice to have a story that does have queer people and like a queer main character where that's just something that is not at all really discussed in any kind of real depth. But it also means that the focus on gay relationships and lesbian relationships in particular does not end up meaning anything thematically. Like, there are stories out there that feature gay main characters that aren't primarily or really even secondarily about like LGBTQ themes that still do manage to explore the experience of being queer in a way that this book just sort of utterly fails at. Also, Rika being a historian is something that really fails to show a proper understanding of, like, the field of history as an academic discipline in historiography. And I say that as someone who's currently in grad school to become a historian. Like, most people who are working in the field of academic history are not, for the most part, with a very few, very rare exceptions, you're not just, like, saying that, you know, X document is fabricated and that we need to believe it because of Y document. It's much more about synthesizing and reinterpreting things that you can find from a variety of documents, including things that appear to be directly contradictory with each other. Like, if just having one thing, every time that there was one document or piece of evidence that seemed to contradict another document or piece of evidence, and if that was like the whole of what history was, then you'd end up with very boring histories. Relatively early on in the story, Rika mentions that she's gone through like 24 scrolls in the past few months during her research, and that just kind of comes across as funny, like, in terms of the amount of both primary and secondary evidence that you have to go through in order to produce something that's, like, academically valuable and is a valuable piece of scholarship is going to be way more than that. And, like, history isn't just reconstructing the specific events that happened in the past, but it's about being able to analyze and interpret what that means and how, like, different societies evolved over time. And so the plot hinges on needing to find first a specific scroll and then a specific sword, whose very existence would then disprove the authenticity of the Scorpio Code, which just happens to be very similar to the plot of Zootopia 2, which I just find very funny. But like I said, one piece of primary evidence disproving the other is just something that is a given in studying history. And you get the feeling that when Milo wrote this, he either did not really understand the field of historical study very much at all, or he was just, you know, a young teenager. And finally, I think just the idea of the code itself is just very confused and bizarre. Like, as I said, why does the existence of a code that leads to, just textually within the narrative itself, hundreds of thousands of deaths of Scorpios, and only Scorpios, then lead to the Scorpio Stellarium being the one in power? So if we continue along with this metaphor, it's basically saying that the Bible and all of, like, the homophobic stuff within Christianity or within other religions was actually written by closeted, gay, neurodivergent people who are good at masking in order to oppress other people who are gay or neurodivergent, but that somehow means that if you're masking or in the closet, you're actually the ones in power. It's just hilariously bad. I think it would work like a million times better as a story if a different sign was in power and enforced the code in sort of like a caste system where the Scorpios are at the very bottom. Then the idea would be that the government would be saying that this caste system and this hierarchy are required in order to keep society in balance, but the struggle of the story would be to overthrow this hierarchy and to show that even without that, society still is functional and that's a more just world for everyone else. So just like some concluding remarks, I was going to try to offer more specific feedback in terms of how to improve the story, but I'm not really a fiction writer, so I don't know if I could really offer a lot of good feedback in that way. But I think that even more than just the like proofreading and doing line edits to make the prose a lot more readable and to avoid all of the frequent mistakes in language that we get, I think that this novel really needs work on just a really fundamental level, developmentally. Like the entire plot, the way that the world works, all of the themes and ideas just need to really be rethought and reworked at a very fundamental level. I don't want to say that it's entirely a lost cause, but frankly, Milo has shown himself to be not very good at editing and very bad at taking feedback, and is clearly extremely attached to this world in a way that I don't think is super helpful, and that he doesn't seem to want to ever give up on any of these elements that are just non-functional, and that he needs certainly to express a much less juvenile understanding of how society works and like the way that religion works, the way that propaganda works, all of these sorts of things. And I'm very doubtful that this revised edition is going to ever really address any of those core problems in a more extensive level. I was originally planning on making this video after the revised edition was released, but I changed my mind for a couple of reasons. First, I'm not confident that this revised edition is ever actually going to exist. And then secondly, because this current edition is so poorly edited, I think it ends up being a lot more like unintentionally revealing of Milo's worldview and what he wanted to get across and sort of what he ended up getting across, as opposed to something that has been through a lot more readers, has been through a lot more proofreading and editing and stuff like that. This ultimately reads as something that was produced primarily by an edgy teenage writer, and that's something that presumably would have been worked out if it had been properly edited, both developmentally and on a line level. I do wish that I could be a little bit more positive about the future of this project, but I think that too many bridges with the audience have been burned, and that the book just requires way too much developmental and copy editing in order to really get to a level that would be acceptable in the time frame that Milo's laid out. And yeah, that's my first video on this channel, so I guess like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff if you want to see me in the future. I'm probably going to focus a lot more on specifically like furry content and furry history, but this was just something that I'd been really fascinated by for a really long time and wanted to go into depth with. So, see ya.